of April, and in this webinar series, we actually partner up with industry experts to share on insights and experience on online learning. Third, in our series today, we will cover on remote online learning in the face of disruption. Just like the past few webinars, before we start, I'd like to cover the following housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is being recorded. A copy of the recording will be shared after the webinar. You will be put on mute during the webinar itself, and if you would like to view the presentation in full screen mode, please click on View on the menu bar on the top and select the full screen. Next, there is a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can use the Q&A box to submit your questions. Please do not type any of the questions in the chat box. This will be used for the webinar announcement, as you have seen earlier on when you just joined. Lastly, we will conduct a quick poll at the end of the sessions. For your feedback, please click here to view the questions and submit your answer. And now I'd like to pass over to you, my colleague Jasmine, to start off the webinar with a short introductions and also to introduce our speaker of the day, Mr. Nacha. Over to you, Jasmine.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lina. Hope you can hear me. Very good afternoon to all of you. This is Jasmine from mcGraw-Hill Asia, based at Singapore. At Singapore, where I am right now, we're in the middle of a circuit breaker, which requires closure of all our schools and institutions. Just 2 days ago, our Prime Ministers have announced this measure will be in place until 1st of June. Institutions of higher learning have to shift their classes to full online delivery until 1st of June. And we know this has been very difficult for you. We at McGraw-Hill think it's crucial that we help you in any way we can, and we want to provide you as much support as we can. This explains why we are organizing a series of webinars to share with you the best practices to shift to online learning. This webinar series is not only scratching the surface of the content on how to move your learning online or any quick fix or how to rapidly do an online course. We want to truly help you. We believe only a pedagogical-driven approach is more sustainable. Therefore, we have adopted the approach to engage the best faculty developer in Singapore to deliver how they have done it at their institution. This includes research-based approach, proven and tested practices. In today's webinar, we recognize that transiting to remote learning situation for many of you can be complicated. Remote learning support for you can be very challenging. To help you address this, we have invited Dr. Nacha to speak on the topic, remote online learning in the face of disruption. Dr. Nacha is the current Program Director in Learning Science at Singapore University of Technology and Design. She started out her career in researching and teaching microbiology and microbiology. A deep interest in connecting with learners in understanding how to design curriculum and teach effectively changed her career path to educational development. And we're very honored to have her here today to share with you. Before I bring up online, I would like to invite you to launch 2 URL that you can find in the chat box. And you open up the chat box and click on this 2 URL that I have just pasted in. The first one is www.menti.com, and the second URL is a friendly short URL. I'd like you to launch them and have them in your browser and stand by. As you can see, in today's webinar, Dr. Nacha has prepared an activities that would like to involve you, and we'd like to engage you deeply in today's webinar through some activity So if you can, I'd like you to participate, respond spontaneously on this activity. So please launch them and have them in a browser, and Dr. Nacha will instruct you when you will need to go to the website to participate. So please do get it on your website, or you can have it on your handphone as well to get ready for this activity. So pretty excited to start today's webinar. So without further ado, Dr. Nacha, please, can you turn on your video and audio? And I'd like to invite you to share your screen as well.
Okay, so thank you, Jasmine. I think we are all set.
All set. Good.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to this online webinar on remote teaching and learning in the face of disruption. So let me kickstart with the presentation slides. I'll just do share my screen so it'll be easier. I don't have to keep clicking. Okay, as we set up. Okay, as Jasmine introduced, I'm Nacha. I'm the Program Director of Learning Sciences Lab at SUTD, Singapore University of Technology and Design. Yes. So many of you might be from overseas. Right now, what's happening, as Jasmine explained, is that we are all at home, working from home, teaching and learning from home. And looks like this is going to be extended until the 1st of June. So, you know, we can't just say that we will just adapt for 1 month. Maybe this could be extended for a longer time. And we need to be a lot more prepared to teach online. So we hope that this session will help you in a slightly longer term preparation. As we start off this particular webinar, I wanted to understand how much we are ready to begin with, and also to look at the challenges that we might be facing in moving towards online teaching, so that we can see how far we can address in this very short 1 hour session. Obviously, we cannot address all of those challenges. We will set the expectations, and then we will see how much we can gather from this session. This online session will give you, introduce you to a couple of pedagogical ideas or frameworks, and we'll see how we can apply these in redesigning our lessons for online teaching. So if I might invite you to go to www.menti.com and key in this number 829945, we could see your responses on how your institute or you yourself are ready in terms of teaching online. Now, some of the universities, I don't think a lot of universities here are really into online teaching. Most of us are into face-to-face teaching or blended type of teaching. So, but even though if it is a traditional university, many of us might have tried blended and flipped learning. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the screen. Okay, so let us see the response. Are you able to see the responses too? Yeah, looks like a lot of us have tried blended learning or flipped learning. Some of us, but majority seems to have just used LMS and occasional online resources, not so much of blended and flipped learning. Nevertheless, thank you for your responses. Okay. Okay, we get an idea. So most of us are in the second and third category. Some of us, no problem. So perhaps we can learn from you. Some of us are not ready, or in the last category, you know, that you primarily use the learning management system for classroom management to put your materials. But a majority of us fall in the middle section actually, where we have tried flipped learning, we have materials. It's not such a bad scenario. It's not so bleak. So let us see how this session can help you to become more effective. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay. What are your challenges in teaching online? So you could perhaps list out 3 of the topmost challenges that you have at your university. or personally in teaching online? What are the challenges that you have in teaching online? Are you able to see the question? Great. Okay. I will give it about 30 seconds. You just let the cloud build up. It's interesting, isn't it? How this can be so possible online. Even more responses than face-to-face teaching. Okay, so we will hold it here. You may continue to give more responses. Okay, maybe we'll just slow it for now because otherwise the map is building on too much. If I may try to extract out some meaning out of this. Okay, could we? Okay, maybe I need to stop it. Is that? Okay. Okay, I took control of it. Otherwise, the cloud is just building up. Okay, so let us look at it. Can you see it? So it seems to be a lot about internet connectivity. That is the biggest problem. Technology and technical, again, internet connections in gadgets. Okay, what is the next most critical thing? It seems to be interaction, student attention and participation, motivation, okay, student readiness, making essays, quiz, assessments. So there are a lot of responses here. If we try to summarize it, looks like quite a lot of it is on the technology part of it. And then a varied aspects on pedagogy. Okay, so this is exactly what we saw in our survey at our institute as well. A lot of them seem to be related to technology in our university. Again, as you mentioned, technical aspects, and also varied aspects as classroom management, collaborative learning, how do we assess, and how do you conduct practical lessons and things like that. Singapore University of Technology and Design is a lot about experiential teaching and learning and hands-on learning, project-based learning. So we require our students to be engaged in projects in almost every single module. So it's going to be quite challenging for us. These are the kind of challenges that we face, and we can broadly categorize them as technology and pedagogy. For this particular session, we will focus a lot more on the pedagogical elements. And I think quite often instructors, faculty members tend to actually start with the tech tools because that seems to be the most common sensible thing to do, okay? And also because technology tools can be a limiting factor. We might want to look at what our universities are subscribing to, and then we are limited by those choices and what we can use as free resource. So that might be one of the reasons why we start with technology. But faculty developers like myself would often encourage our faculty members to start with the let me go to, yeah. So faculty developers like myself, we would often encourage our faculty members to go to the learning outcomes. Start with what we want our students to achieve out of that teaching and learning activity, and then design your curriculum and come up with the activities and do the assessment. So this learning outcomes can be classified as knowledge, content knowledge. We want students to acquire the basic knowledge, and then we want them to apply. So this can be in terms of disciplinary skills, or it can be in terms of 21st century communication, collaboration skills, and so on and so forth. It can also be the attitudinal values that we want our students to achieve out of that course. The learning outcomes can be classified in a different form, which most teachers would be familiar with. We are introduced to the Bloom's taxonomy as we go through the teacher training program, and for every course planning and lesson plan, we have to come up with the learning outcomes. So we might have these 6 categories of Bloom's taxonomy learning outcomes as knowledge, understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. This is another perspective. Now, these Bloom's taxonomy learning outcomes can be classified as lower order and higher order learning outcomes. And we see that very naturally, the lower order learning outcomes, which are about facts and information, can be easily taught through a teacher-oriented direct lecturing method, which most universities are used to traditionally. However, the higher order learning outcomes would be quite apt for student-centered learning methods such as project-based learning, problem-based learning, case-based learning, teaching methods that focus a lot more on the students and which put the responsibility and onus on the students, and the teacher becomes more of a facilitator. So the kind of learning outcomes actually determine the kind of teaching methodologies in some ways. The teaching methodologies at the end of the day is trying to get our students from wherever they are to where we want them to get to, which is our intended learning outcomes. So during this process, during this teaching activity process, we also have to monitor whether the students are able to make the jump, how far and how well they have made the jump. So this is the assessment. So you see that the learning outcomes is very it should be very well mapped to the teaching and learning activities and the assessment. Now this principle, concept, framework, whatever you want to call it, is called constructive alignment, and it was introduced by Dick. We see that when we are doing lectures, it would probably be okay to focus a lot more on the content knowledge. But if you are doing project-based learning, then we don't want to just focus on the content knowledge. We also want to think about the process skills, whether the students have learned the practical disciplinary skills that they should, and even communication skills. So the assessments have to be mapped to the learning outcomes and the teaching activities. Now this is something that we must remember, whether it is face-to-face or blended or online teaching. So I just wanted to lay the groundwork as we start thinking about redesigning our content, right? Now, when I share this with faculty members, very often they tell me, Nasha, this is really very nice and useful framework, but I find it too theoretical. Can you tell me something more practical? Can you just tell me what to do? So I kept thinking about this and wondered what was missing here. And I think it is possibly because they are right that the constructive alignment theory is more of a theoretical perspective on how we go about curriculum design. But it doesn't tell how we design the teaching activities. It doesn't consider what goes on in the classroom as teaching activities. So when I was working in Singapore Management University in 2015, I came up with this teaching and learning activity framework. I just wanted to give you the context of how I came up with this. Right now we have COVID-19 situation, but back then in 2015 and throughout the years, in Singapore, we usually have this period from August, September, October, where we have this haze, the environmental pollution haze from the forest fire in the region, in the ASEAN region. So there was a certain period in Singapore that the schools had to be closed, and the ministry was asking us, the university, if we are ready for that kind of emergency situation. And when I was there at SMU, I had come up with this framework to build the capacity of our faculty members in teaching online. So that was the background to the framework. Now let me go into the framework. The framework looks at the teaching and learning activities as, what happens when a teacher goes into the classroom. They would probably have to manage the class, see who is attending the class, who is absent, have they completed the assignments, and so on and so forth. And then they will do the lecturing and the content delivery. And in SMU, like Singapore Management University and Singapore University of Technology and Design, it's a lot about interactive, active, collaborative learning. So it can be the lecturer interacting with the students, getting them to participate as student participation, or getting the students to participate with each other. So that can be more about collaboration. And then we also want to monitor their progress and give them feedback. So this is the kind of actual activity that goes on in the classroom. Now this happens in the classroom. There is also pre-classroom and post-classroom activities. But you can basically divide them into these 5. And this is very similar to Gardner's instructional events, but in a different perspective. Now, when we adapt this for online learning, what we can do is that, as you can see in the tip box, the first thing to do is to identify what kind of teaching activity we are looking at. Are we going to manage the class? Are we thinking about delivering content? Or do we want student participation? And then choose the relevant technology tools. Now, this is very different from starting with the technology tools and then trying to do the teaching. Now we start with the pedagogy first. Now, I try to also combine the 2 frameworks. You see that the constructive alignment actually comes in terms of the learning outcomes. So that is more about the curriculum development. When we are coming up with the lesson plans for the module, the lessons plans for that particular lesson, what we want the students to achieve at the end of each activity, that is more of the curriculum development. And then we decide what activities we are going to have in the classroom. So you see that the learning outcomes is actually mapped to the teaching activities, and this is mapped to the assessment. So that is the combination of the 2 frameworks, right? And this framework can be applied for face-to-face or blended learning. So when I moved over to SUTD, this was used for blended learning. The takeaway from this is that we have, like in SMU, we have classroom management and content delivery. But I also realized that in SUTD's pedagogy, we have a lot of self-directed active learning activities as well. So it's not just active learning in teams, but self-directed, independent active learning as well. So there could be other activities in your institution, in your disciplinary teaching. What I'm trying to say in this slide is that the teaching activities can be defined by you. It doesn't have to be just the 4 sectors, right? And then you choose whether it is going to be in the using a particular technology or whether it is going to be face-to-face. Now, face-to-face also uses technology, right? So let me then give you 2 case studies of how we apply these teaching and learning activity framework and constructive alignment at SUTD. And then we will try out one activity together to see if, as a team, we can come up with a lesson plan to redesign a particular course to online teaching. Okay, so the first example is from Dr. Oka. He teaches the Introduction to Information Systems and Programming at SUTD. This is a first-year course which introduces students to basic concepts in programming and gets them to do the actual program. So in doing so, they have to try out programming on their own first, to get more practice, and then they will have to also work with the teams in coming up with a project. So this is how it looks like in terms of the framework. He is using this online teaching currently. For classroom management, to provide the materials to ensure that they are all grouped in teams. They know where to put the materials, where to get the materials from for instructions and announcements. We of course use a learning management system as most universities. We use Blackboard and we call this eDimension. He also uses a couple of subscribed software tools. One of the platforms he uses is Piazza, and many of these platforms also have features for announcements and instructions. So he uses that for classroom management, and for content delivery, of course, he uses eDimension, and he also uses Microsoft Teams, which allows for synchronous and asynchronous lectures. Similar to WebEx, you can use Microsoft Teams or even Zoom. He uses Microsoft Teams, and he also, to make this more interactive, like I had used the Mentimeter, he uses Slido, which is another platform, as well as Socrates, to do question and answers and polling. Okay, so the third element that he does is that, because this is about programming, he wants students to ensure that they are able to use the right syntax, and they do not have any bugs in their programs and so on and so forth. So they could use this particular tool for programming and OKRM, and he could ask the students to submit, and the system will give the students feedback. So it's more for self-directed learning. And very similarly, for collaboration, a lot of us use free tools like Google Docs, which allows for fantastic online synchronous collaborative activities. For assessment and feedback, he uses a variety. He uses the quizzes in the eDimension. He uses open-ended assignment, polls, Piazza for question and answers. He looks at the quality of the questions that students are asking, and he asks students to do a self-explanatory video of whatever program they have done for their projects. So that is how he uses. Right now, I'm not going through all of the tools that he uses, but I just wanted to share with you that many of these sites actually have the success stories and user cases. So you might want to refer to them. Okay, so I'll stop at the tools there. For my own course, I do a teaching course for graduate students at SUTD on teaching at SUTD, and these are the learning outcomes. So you will see that the learning outcomes, a couple of them, like in the case of, Oka's case, we have lower order and higher order learning outcomes. For instance, I want my students to know the different teaching methodologies, and then I want them to be able to apply this in actual practice, that they are able to do student-centered teaching. So the basic part, the first lower order learning outcomes is more of the knowledge part, and the higher order tends to be more of the application part. Okay, so that is where the learning outcomes comes in. Now let's see the plan that I have for this May 2020. I used to do this in a blended format. Now I'm going to use some of these materials to be online. I will also be using the eDimension for classroom management and also content delivery. I have pre-recorded videos that I have been using for my blended learning, so I will continue to use them. I also have materials that I have been using in my classes before, like journal papers and textbook articles, so I would continue to use them. For collaboration and interaction, I used to conduct these activities with Mentimeter and Google Doc. I will use them online. And for assessment and feedback, I will do quiz, video submissions, and reflections. Now, many of them I have been doing, so it is very quick for me to convert these to online teaching. Let us look at this a little more detail, right? So for the classroom management, of course, we put on our announcements and tell them what to do. Now, in online teaching, it is a lot more critical to do this classroom management. You need to tell the students what to do, when to click, even though there are many features on our tools. Let's say, for instance, we are using WebEx to do synchronous lecturing. just like what Lena had done. There are a lot of features. There is polling, there is question and answers, there is chatting. We need to structure our lesson and classroom management. We need to tell students when to use the poll, when to use the question and answer, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, it becomes a little messy. All right. Now, for classroom management, I have given them articles. I used to do this as a breakout session in the classroom where they read the articles before they come to the class, and then they will do jigsaw teaching. Okay, each group will teach the other teams on whatever topics that they have read up, and I will facilitate the session. So right now we will use Microsoft Teams maybe. I'm still thinking about it, how I'm going to do that, right? We can use the breakout rooms to get the teams to discuss. For collaboration and interaction, I think I will just continue the same tools that I have used. Mentimeter is fine to start, it's like an icebreaker for brainstorming of ideas, to identify and group categories. It's a great tool. For the assessment, we usually have a classroom micro teaching session where we will record the students teaching for 5 to 10 minutes. I will ask my students now to do the online teaching using PowerPoint or some other tool, and then to upload it to eDimension. And I also ask them to do reflection questions because I want to find out more about the thinking process that goes into teaching. So, maybe things like what technology tools would you suggest to question students in class or something like that. So that is basically how I do my redesigning for online learning. Some takeaways are that no one size fits all. So you have to kind of adapt the teaching and learning activity framework to suit whatever disciplinary topics you're teaching, the level that you're teaching, and sometimes we have to modify the activity. For instance, in my class, I used to do a role play of 3 students, one being a student, one being a teacher, and one being an observer, where we use Socrative questioning to teach. And right now, when we move this to online, perhaps it's a little difficult because I need to have many teams. It's easier in a face-to-face class. So I will have to probably drop this activity and think of something, or completely redesign another activity for Socrative questioning. So what I'm trying to say is that when we move from face-to-face to online teaching, it's not going to be effective to move directly. We have to pick and choose what works and what doesn't. Okay, so with that, we will try a redesigning activity so that this session has been useful for you. I got this learning outcomes, this course material from Google. This is from NUS, and I picked something that is familiar to me and that is also familiar to all of us given the COVID-19 situation of environmental microbiological principles. We have some learning outcomes for the course here. So we can try and redesign some elements for this course, okay, to see if we can apply what we have learned today in this webinar. So if you look at the learning outcomes here, there are 6 learning outcomes, and we could basically categorize them as this. Let's just go through them in detail so we will be able to make sense of it and do the activity. So the learning outcomes ask us to explain cell properties, structure, life cycles of prokaryotes, eukaryotes. These are bacteria, and then of all the microorganisms. So explain the different microorganisms. How does the environment interact in the natural engineered systems of microbes? Okay, list the various environmental conditions which allow them to grow, interpret the role and applications of microbiology in environmental engineering and public health. For instance, if you have antibiotic resistance, why is it that we have, what features of the microbes enable, or if you want to have a biowarfare, what makes it possible? Can we create one? And how do we nullify these? Okay, and then we also want to focus on the skills, perform basic microbiological lab skills, and we want effective communication. So you see that we have the content part, we have the skills, and we have the 21st century skills. And some of the attitudinal part of ethics and all that is probably underpinning the entire learning outcome. So what we are going to do is that I will give you an example. I'll show you an example of starting with the learning outcomes and moving on to the teaching and learning activities and assessment, okay, using the two frameworks that we have looked at, the constructive alignment and the teaching and learning activity framework, okay, and then we will move on to the higher order learning outcomes, and you will do the higher order learning outcomes. Okay, so let us start with the first example. How would you teach this particular lower order learning outcomes? Explain, describe, listing. It doesn't matter if it is environmental microbiology or physics or chemistry or humanities. These are usually the lower order. How would we do that? The typical answer is that, as I had already explained, these are very suitable for unidirectional or active lecturing. Okay, so we could have online lecturing activities. This could be synchronous, asynchronous videos. It could be my own videos or something from Khan Academy, and I can have some activities to make this more of an active learning. And because it is more of content, then I could do more of quizzes like multiple choice questions and Google Forms, or I could give them a problem, make it more like a short structured question. Okay, this is one way of doing it. So we have alignment, as well as we have looked at the various aspects of teaching and learning. And if I'm teaching this in a different way, more of an inductive approach, more of an interactive approach, maybe I can actually ask the students to teach. Now, I know we have to be very careful in this strategy. It is not going to work for every class and every student, because if we get to teaching is the best way to learn, but if we ask them to teach, then why do they need us, right? Some students might struggle. So you really need to see the students' prior knowledge, if they are capable of this. By getting them to, maybe perhaps we can scaffold it by giving them resources, giving them online materials, and then watch it, and then maybe explain a particular concept or an application. And then they can video record it and upload it, and we can then review it. So that is one example of mapping the learning outcomes to teaching and learning activities and assessment using the teaching and learning activity framework. Now it is going to be your turn. You have been listening to me very patiently. It's time for some action if this session has been useful for you. So I would like to invite you to now go to the Google Doc. I have given 3 modes of accessing this. You can use the QR code reader. You can try and type in this tiny URL code, and then you could also try clicking here. Okay, you could go to Google Doc. Let me escape and go to the Google Doc and show you what we are going to do. Right now, I don't know how this is going to work. This is the first time I'm working with a very large group. Usually my classes, because both SMU and SUTD, we work with smaller groups of students. So it's usually about 50, 60. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, this is what we need to do. We are now trying to redesign our activities, teaching and learning activities for online learning. And the learning outcomes we are starting out are more of the higher order learning outcomes. So this is about interpreting, it's about performing, it's about communicating. And what we want to then do is Okay, I need to ask you to hold on first. I know that some of you are typing in some suggestions for me. Thank you for that. We will just, or maybe you're keying in the answer. I don't know. Okay, let me just manage this a little bit. Give me a minute. Okay, so this is what you need to keep in mind. I want to scroll down. Okay, I have given you one example here. So we will do the teaching activities and assessments first. Okay, we need to map the learning outcomes with the teaching activities and assessment. First step is the activities, and then we will choose the tool. Right? So here I said that maybe if you want students to interpret, okay, you can do all of the 3 learning outcomes, or you can focus on one learning outcome. If you want them to interpret, maybe we can give them some results from practicals that, bad results, and then we can ask students to explain. So we can give pictures of these bad results, which we would have plenty of, I hope, from previous records. And then we can ask students to explain it maybe in a blog and ask the peers to give comments. So this is one suggestion. I want to see some of your suggestion. I will give a few minutes. Maybe this activity probably needs a longer time, but we are constrained by time. So I'll give about 3 minutes, and we will see if anybody has completed. We will go through it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this Google Doc on until maybe let's say tomorrow 6 p.m. You could add in your comments, you could add in your activities, and I can give some comments on the side if it works, and you can come back to see it or something like that. Okay, so that way this is more like a post webinar activity. We could continue on, but we are all tied by other things. So anyways, I hope that this also gives you chance to learn from each other. So I invite you to key in some of your thoughts here. Don't worry, you can be anonymous, so you don't have to worry about your identity. And it's always nice to see different ideas. It's like a brainstorming session, right? So you can see that this is how you can also make the class a little more interactive, use activities to brainstorm, to discuss, and use both synchronous and asynchronous together to complement each other. So, okay, great. So there's a lot of responses going on. I'm just going to pick and choose someone who has completed. Okay, very good. Please continue on. I'm going to say, all right. This is a thinking activity. So, technically it needs a longer time than 3 to 5 minutes. And we do have to give pause time for our students to think and do, for our participants to think and do. So I'm very aware that 3 minutes is a very short time. But let us see what some of us have answered. This looks complete. So this says maybe we can provide student case study to interpret underlying principles. Okay, we give case studies. We expect students to read it, critique it, and then they discuss to collaborate. All right. Okay, a lot of activities going on here. Now, how are we going to use the tools? We use the forum discussion, maybe in a learning management system. Okay, you could also use Teams or some other tools. Okay, and then okay, this is more for the discussion. For the critique and reflection, they are going to use Google document. Okay, that makes sense. So you can say that, you know, this simple activity actually helps you as a designer. I'm not here to say this is a right way to do or this is the only way to do. There's going to be plenty of methods to come up with an online or even any kind of teaching design. There's more than one way to teach the same concept. So this allows you to put forward the different ideas and to evaluate which idea would work for your situation. Okay, this seems correct in terms of making it interactive and active. Let us see if it aligns with the assessment. The assessment is about expecting students to demonstrate competency to interpret and communicate. Yeah, right. So that seems to be aligned. So they are going to use Google Forum for self-evaluation using rubric. It's more assessment for learning. Use rubrics. Okay, use rubrics for instructor evaluation also. Fantastic. So there you have one idea from your colleagues here. There's plenty of other ideas. Okay. Yeah, this is also something similar to case studies, clinical winners. For critical thinking, you can give videos. Yeah. So if the case study can be in the form of videos, it doesn't have to be always text-based. Answer guide questions and rational. Okay. So it can also be, some of it can be in terms of short structure. It can be also quiz. Fantastic. Thank you for all the responses. You may continue on. It will take time for you to pen down your thoughts and for also me to sort of like go through each one of these. I'll do that post webinar. But right now I want to switch back to the slides. And yeah, so we are almost to the end. Thanks for bearing with me, because this is actually a very intense kind of online webinar where we are trying to introduce two frameworks, combine the frameworks, and have many case studies and also do an online activity. So it does take time. We can't rush through it. Sorry for that. This is an example. So we see that, yeah, we can align using the different activities and the mapping of tech tools. The takeaway is that, yeah, you start with whatever you want to do. Do you want to deliver content? Is it a lower order learning outcome? And then can you use videos, or what other ways can you do? Or do you want to make the teaching and learning inductive? And choose the right tool for it. Keep it practical. Start with where you are, and then you have to evaluate if you already have the materials, or you have to scratch everything and then restart from the scratch again. Okay, and you see that actually one of the Google Doc responses included some aspects on McGraw-Hill as well. I forgot to go through that. You see that some of this content from McGraw-Hill follows this as well. And for the lower order, they have the smart book and IC videos. And for the higher order, they have mini simulations. So it is going to be quite expensive for us to come up with mini simulations during this COVID situation, you know, finding partners to come up with a simulation. So you might want to go on to publishers like McGraw-Hill to get the right tools to have that ready-made product, you know, for us to use in our teaching and learning. So I end the session with couple of tips and strategies. This is the most important critical takeaway that you would have from the session. Know the end goal, the learning outcomes, decide on the activities and the assessments, and then come up with the relevant tools. It's very easy to find the tools. So don't start with the tools, because then you will all be very, it will be fuzzy. Not that you can't do it, but if you're just starting out, it's just nice to have some frameworks. Okay. Redesign lessons rather than direct conversions. I repeated it a few times. Make the lessons interactive. You don't have to limit yourself to one tool. But the only thing is that with the internet connectivity, using multiple tools can be a bit tricky. So you have to understand your context and see what works, right? Use a combination of synchronous and asynchronous. Synchronous is very heavy on Wi-Fi connectivity. So you might want to consider a mix of both synchronous and asynchronous and make it an online flipped learning. Flipped learning is basically about getting students to prepare ahead of class and use the contact time for more active learning teaching activities, and then letting off the students to do the more of the reading up again. So we could do this completely online as online flipped learning, and start with what you have, become familiar, do mock-up trial sessions. Okay, when you start, by now you would already have done some of this, so maybe this is not needed. As you're working in a team, as you work as a teacher, work in teams, because online teaching is very time consuming. It takes a lot of time to search and put together materials. To put together a 5-minute video, you probably need to prepare like 2 days, or even for one video. Just doing that video will take you time. So work with teams, build a community, collaborate with your IT folks and library resources. Always run surveys, because we don't know how effective the session is, in online teaching. If this was a face-to-face webinar seminar, I would be able to see if if the session went well, if you're happy with my session, if if there was a certain part that was very confusing from just a facial expression. But right now, as I talk to you, I don't know how many of you are really here, or am I just talking to the screen? So we don't get that kind of feedback. All right, so it's always useful to have surveys and feedbacks, and even if you're using webinars, to have pauses, structure the lessons so that you have pauses for students to ask questions, to have discussion, and to use the various features. Okay, and it's very important to focus on students who need more attention. Online teaching is very difficult. Online learning can also be difficult because we don't know, they are on their own and they may not always raise up their concerns. And they themselves may not know that they are struggling to learn. Online learning is very self-directed, it's very independent. It needs a student to be more organized, and they may not be. So pay closer attention to people, to students who might need that. We didn't cover a lot of things on assessment, but I think online learning makes it possible, and it requires us to focus on the process skills, not just on the outcome. So you might want to include reflections, and instead of focusing on the grading, maybe we want to focus on assessment for learning. Grading, it's a different topic altogether. There are a lot of issues with online assessment in terms of security, in terms of identity, copy pasting and things, and so on and so forth. It's a lot more challenging topic. We need a different webinar on. You could explore virtual simulations, e-texts and resources like from mcGraw-Hill for the practical session. We cannot cover everything. Some things we have to let go, but we can try to come as close as possible. And most of all, have fun in doing so. Don't get too stressed out. You don't have to be perfect. If it's not professional, it's okay. You're working on your own. All right. Yeah. So also give time for students to learn. I say that quite often we don't know how much is enough as we are starting out teaching online. So we tend to be overzealous and give more work. Try to get feedback and assess how much can the students learn, and then tailor it for that session. Obviously, getting you to do the Google Doc, it will take more time than a 45-minute session. But I just wanted to showcase that we can make such online webinars very interactive as well. And I wanted to also structure the lesson such that we have a little bit of in-class and post-class, or in-webinar and post-webinar activities. Okay, so with that, I think we have come to the end of this session. I would like to thank you for your attention and participation. I really enjoyed doing this session. I would like to thank mcGraw-Hill for the opportunity, Jasmine, Lena, and team. If you have further questions, and if we have time, we'll go back to Jasmine. We can have the questions in question and answer part. Otherwise, I have also put in a separate box in the same Google Doc where you can put in questions, and I can try and see if I can answer some of them. But the timeline, I put it to tomorrow 6 p.m. Actually, I thought of putting it to today, but if you want, I could extend it until tomorrow 6 p.m. and I would probably complete all my comments by Monday. So yeah, with that, thank you. So I'm going to close this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yasmin. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Nacha. Yes, you can ask the presenter right back to Lena. Yes, thank you so much. It's a wonderful. I mean, it was quite a meeting. We managed to put through. Yeah, I think this is really wonderful. I think the participants really loved, I think, the experience of that on the Google Doc. You make it so simple. I mean, your pedagogy is presented in a very visual, diagrammatic form. I think today the visual learners among us love this, rather than having a sequential, a linear way of presenting lesson ideas or design approach. You have a doc visual framework presented in a diagrammatic form. So it definitely helps a lot. I love it. I think many of you probably love it too. We'll need you to pass the presenter right.
I was just wondering. I forgot again. No.
Yeah.
How do I do
that? Click on the participant under panelists, and then you can click on.
Okay, I got it. Yes.
Yeah.
I just find that there is a lot of windows out here, right? That when you're presenting, it just gets a little nervous, and I don't know, maybe it feels like being a pilot. So many windows here: chat box, Q&A, and video.
Yes, I mean, I love many points that you bring across. As I always say in my own words, attendees is not about a Dropbox experience that you're giving to your students. You don't load all your PPT, your Word document and Excel, and just expect the students to learn. I think today Dr. Nacha provides you a very, very good, a very simple, very easy to understand approach. She presented it in a diagrammatic form, and she gives you examples using her university's two module and plus an activity today to get you. And I think they're gonna really appreciate your efforts to allow them to continue to input into the Google Docs. I encourage you, participants, please continue to put into the Google Docs your ideas. Dr. Nacha has committed to comment of it. She'll try her best. We don't know. There's so few a few hundreds of you. She'll try her best, but no promises that all questions will get a comment from her. Good questions definitely will get a comment from her. So you have a chance to input in the Google document that Dr. Nacha has put up. And keep the document. She will only close it tomorrow 6 p.m. So try your best. because we do running out of time, but definitely we try. Let's give this a try on the questions that is coming in. There are lots of good questions, but let me try, Dr. Nacha. There's this questions from Roberto.
Okay.
A very simple one. How do you do zigzag teaching in online teaching?
Can you come again? How do you
do zigzag in online teaching?
Jigsaw. I had to think about it. Yeah, I think if you use like breakout, WebEx has a breakout function. So what happens in Jigsaw activity is that, let's say you have 5 different teams, you can give them an article or video or something. Okay, so they need to process some content first. They have to read and they have to think about it, and then they one of like they will go to different teams to teach. I think the Jigsaw activity, they have different names, World Cafe or something like that. People call it by different names. So you have modified versions of it.
Yes.
Basically, it's like one team takes responsibility for one topic, and then they might have one person going to the different teams to teach, right? So I have to think about this. I have not done this online. So what I was going to do is basically make it a little simpler. Just make sure that, let's say, team A is supposed to read up on project-based learning. They will read up on that, and then they will do a video on it. All right, and the other teams will have to view it and then say what part was correct or what was not correct, or how similar was it to problem-based learning. Why do they call this problem-based learning? Why do they call it project-based learning, or something like that? So that's what I'm trying to say. I think if we try to make everything of face-to-face teaching to online teaching, it may not work. Right now, the technology is a limiting factor, but we can be creative. It also depends if your university has subscribed to the higher feature functions. So like for us, we use Zoom, but we only have the basic package, so we are limited by technology right now. Hope that answers. Yeah.
You're right. It's a very collaborative approach. Yeah, it takes a lot of effort to even use Zoom for this. Yes, Zoom has breakout rooms which you can try, but it's going to be very challenging to manage different rooms with different topics. It is still possible, probably after many runs. And considering many of your questions related to internet connections, to having synchronous live video, having so many rooms is just as challenging. I think Mr. Nacha gave you a synchronous approach where you design a package in groups in your own time and space, complete it. Sounds like Rubik's is very popular. I see that a lot in the Google Docs just now. Rubik's is, I think, one of the most effective way, like Dr. Nacha said, for self-evaluation, for peer evaluation, and for instructors to give feedback to the students. Yes, that's wonderful. Yes. And another good questions I'd like to bring up. Clive asks, my course entails a lot of higher order thinking, higher order learning, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Any examples that someone has done this?
Could you repeat again, please?
Yes, Clive said that his course entails a lot of higher order learning, such as analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. He's probably asking for examples. He's asking any examples of someone done this.
Yeah, it's quite difficult to answer that, actually. I mean, in terms of analysis, synthesis, it really depends, right? The exact year, the curriculum. So can you redesign? Yes, there are universities which does completely online teaching for university subjects. So it is possible. But is it the same experience as face-to-face lesson? The answer is going to be no. So we can get close to it, but probably it's not going to be the same. And we are a little bit caught right now because we were caught unaware. We were not like, it's not like in a normal situation where we had all the facilities and we are trying to do an online teaching.
Yes.
For instance, if I want to have some photos and if I want to use the lab facilities as a teacher, I have no access to the lab now. I can't even go in, run an experiment, take photos. So we are very limited with the resources. So right now, I think we are in a situation, we are in a gap period where we are trying to make the best of the situation and still give effective and quality education. So it may not be the optimal. We will try. I think it's a little difficult for me to answer in full. And if I think the name was Sky, if you want to, you could leave a note,
questions,
and then I
will
will try and get back. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, Clive. So we really lack of time. There's so many good questions, but I probably like to pick one last one that I hope there's a bit of fun in this. That's from Annalyn. Thank you. This is really very educational and inspiring. My concern is I'm teaching baking and cooking. What can I use to assess their skill through the use of online learning? Maybe you can deliver the food to the instructor.
Actually, I like cooking and I like baking too. So that's an interesting question. How can you teaching? I think maybe it's not so difficult because you say that there's so many YouTube channels which are into baking and cooking. So in terms of the actual practical skills, I think you have to use, again, I'm assuming that you can ask them to video record. I'm assuming some of the basic technology capabilities, but this needs to be depending on the technology. But you could ask them to blog, you could ask them to even come up with an infographic comparing the different cuisine of different countries. They can go to so many video links. I mean, cooking and baking is just phenomenal amount of YouTube videos out there, right? And, so you could try and use some of these free materials and encourage them to cook and post and talk about it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely difficult to assess. Yes, the fragrance and
the assessment. Yes, I think in terms of assessment, that's I think assessment for a lot of these activities, you have to come up with good rubrics. I think like the topic of rubrics and assessment is a topic on its own. It needs another session. Yeah, it's very important to come up with good rubrics for peer evaluation as well as instructor evaluation. And as I mentioned, I think because of a lot of challenges with the identity, student identity, if it is them that that is doing the work and it's not somebody else doing. I think right now my recommendation is to focus more on assessment for learning and make it more for credit rather than for grading. I don't have a good solution for this. This is the biggest.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, right now we're just getting the content to them. Yeah, so we need to take certain other topics on a different webinar. One of it is rubrics. Second is assessment. Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's not impossible to replace the high-stake exam and assessment using the current mode. It's just impossible. And you're absolutely right. The assessment for learning is the right approach to have students learn from deliberate practice, learn from reflecting on auto-grading that we might do of our learning system or assessment systems. So that is the most appropriate, I think, learning mode at the moment. Yes. So, so sorry, everyone, we are running out of time. We already burst our 1 hour mark. We started late, but and we have ended late as well. It's 4:13. So Dr. Nacha is really kind enough. She will try her best to answer you through the Google documents that you just put online. So please give it a try. Use the continue to try out the template that she designed for you to plan out a lesson, or she has included a segment at the bottom of the document for you to enter some of your questions. She will try her best, but on the behalf, I say no promises because there are a few hundreds of you. She has a weekend to attend to her family. She's already kind enough to join us today. Thank you, Dr. Naja, for
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please hold online as I invite Lena back, close this session. And there are many questions. Some questions are quite consistent.
Yeah.
Yes, we're going to send you the recording of today's session. Yes, we're going to send you the presentation deck that with Dr. Nacha's permission, whatever is released will be sent to you. Yes, we will be doing that. Please stay on while I invite Lena back to close this session. And I really encourage you, yes, there are many questions. Yes, do get in touch with us if you would like us to help you with resources. Yes, mcGraw-Hill has an array of pedagogically driven digital solutions, such as assessment that's already method tech by Bloom's taxonomy, like what Dr. Nacha has said, readily available resources that are already classified by Bloom's taxonomy for you to design a very specific lesson experience, learning experience for your students. Yes, Lena, please. Yes, thank you, Dr. Nacha, once again.
Yeah, sure, yes. Thank you.
Yes, so now I'll pass the baton back to Lena, and I encourage you to everyone to continue to follow us. We will be making an announcement about our next webinar very soon that we have lined up for you. And we are going to organize more webinars ahead for the coming weeks. So do look out for our electronic email that's coming to you. And we will be making an announcement very soon. Lena, are you online?
Yep. Hi. Thank you, Dr. Nacha and Jasmine, for the presentations and Q&A sessions. So right now, we just would like to conduct a quick poll. So please refer to your poll direct box for submissions. Your feedback is really very important for us. So you should be able to see your poll on the screen right now. So just do take a couple of moments to fill out the 3 simple questions. And as Jasmine has said, thank you for joining us today. We do have more sessions lined out for the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for our communications or follow us on our social for more information. So please do submit your poll questions, your poll into the dialog box right now. So we have still about 1 to 2 minutes more for the submissions of your poll. I will really encourage all of you to submit. And of course, do drop us a note if you have any suggestions or any requests for any webinar topic. We will definitely love to hear this from you too. Yep, we have another 1 more minute before we'll close the poll for the day. Please do submit your answers to us, and if you have any suggestions or any requests for any topics that you would like to hear from mcGraw-Hill, please feel free to drop us a note in the chat. And yes, as Jasmine has mentioned earlier on, we will be sending out a post-webinars email. So look out for it, where you actually get a link to stream the recording and also and a presentation there that is done by Dr. Nacha. Do look out for the email that will be coming your way next week. Okay, we have a couple more seconds before we close the poll for the day. So once again, I'd like to say thank you for joining us. For those who have been with us for the third sessions, do continue to come back to join us for the rest of the sessions that we have in the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for our communications or follow us on Facebook, on our social, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or for more information. In the meantime, do stay safe, and I hope to see you in our next webinars real soon. Okay, I think we are closing the poll now. Thank you for your submissions and your answers. We really appreciate it.